Thank you for tuning in to another episode of The Launchpad. I am your host, Dave Kluge. As always, I am joined with two amazing guests. Today, we have JL Garofalo and Simon Groeneveld from Front Yard Fantasy. We are going to be looking at some Week 7 matchups and the fantasy football implications of those matchups. We're going to be talking about Breece Hall and whether he is a top 5 running back over the rest of the season. We're going to look at Dak Prescott and how he is going to improve, hopefully, this offense for the Dallas Cowboys. We're going to be looking at the Pittsburgh Steelers and some of the injuries and quarterback concerns that could be happening there, and also looking at the Ravens and what that game could look like with a possibility that Rashod Bateman, Mark Andrews, and J.K. Dobbins could all be out or limited in this matchup. This is a great episode, and you will want to stick through to the very end of this week's episode of The Launchpad. Can you feel confident starting J.K. Dobbins this week? That and so much more on today's episode of The Launchpad. JL, go ahead and start us off here. Can you feel any confidence if you have J.K. Dobbins in your starting lineup this week?
I think you can have some confidence. The Ravens, they're dedicated to use J.K. Dobbins. Kenyon Drake looked good filling in for Dobbins. We talked about it extensively this week. A lot of people worried about that tightened up knee that Dobbins is dealing with. I think it's normal. I think it's genuinely just like this is a normal thing happens. Dude tore his ACL. It's normal to have a game where his knee is tightened up. I'm not worried too long term. I think you got to evaluate this risk appropriately, but he's still the guy there. I'm not worried. Kenyon Drake's not stealing his job. Gus Edwards isn't stealing his job. It's J.K. Dobbins' job.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's as simple as that. And I think that's what people need to realize is this guy's coming back from an injury. He's going to have some occasional setbacks here or there. You said ACL, but I believe it was ACL, LCL, MCL, hamstring. I'm pretty sure he tore like every single thing holding him top of his leg to the bottom of his leg. So pretty drastic injury, but he's young. He's talented. He's going to be able to bounce back. Same question to you, though, Simon. I mean, are there any concerns, or are you kind of in the same boat as JL?
Now, I am a little bit more concerned, and that concern comes from looking at the practice report from yesterday and today. J.K. Dobbins was a non-participant Wednesday and Thursday in practice. Wednesday, that's normal, especially a player coming back from injury, veterans. When they don't practice on Thursday as well, that's when I start getting concerned for that upcoming weekend. Kenyon Drake was successful in this backfield last week. It seems like they trust him, and they're comfortable rolling him out there as their primary ball carrier. If there are any questions around this running back that I think they kind of want to build around, the guy that they view as their star, I don't see the Ravens pushing him too hard. So I am concerned. I think you get another week out of starts from Kenyon Drake, but then it's everything else JL said for the rest of the season. It's the J.K. Dobbins backfield. It just may be one more week of Drake.
So most of the audience that tunes in regularly knows that we record this show on Thursday evenings and release it on Friday morning. So when you listen to the show, the actionable advice you can take from this is to pay attention to that Friday afternoon practice report. We want to see how he is able to play. If he logs even a limited practice, that probably means that he's going to play this week. But if he's a no participant on Friday, that's when you can start sounding the alarms and getting a little bit concerned. So thanks for that, Simon. And be sure to check out later this afternoon on Friday afternoon to see what type of practice, if any, J.K. Dobbins is able to log. Let's go ahead and dive right in. I want to thank everybody for tuning into episode 51 now of The Launchpad. We had a fun little milestone last week, and now here we are into the next 50, hopefully many more after that. Just a reminder, you can find all of these shows on the Footballguys channels now. So wherever you listen to your podcast, you can find it. Just search The Launchpad, Dave Kluge, Footballguys, and also at youtube.com/Footballguys. Last week, I was with Chris Harris, Taylor Cornell. We were looking at Week 6 matchups, and today I am with my good friends JL and Simon, and we're going to be looking at some Week 7 matchups. Both of you guys are over at Front Yard Fantasy, and that's why I wanted to bring you on for a show together, just to highlight the awesome brand that you guys have put together. Front Yard Fantasy is so much fun. I've had the pleasure of guesting on a few shows in the past. So JL, why don't you introduce yourself first? Let everyone know where they can find you, what you guys are doing over at Front Yard Fantasy, where they can find the website, where they can find you on social media, and all of that fun stuff. The floor is yours.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so happy to be here, Dave. Truly one of our closest friends in the industry. Yeah, I'm JL Garofalo, joined by my best friend, co-founder Simon Groeneveld. I almost said Simon Garofalo, which would have been really funny. I had to clip that. Yeah. Yeah, we do. If you haven't heard of us yet, we are the idiots that most people are probably making fun of on Twitter or calling buffoons, making lots of poop jokes. But we have the most engaging, fun fantasy football community that we're building over at Front Yard Fantasy, all around games, all around fantasy football and the culture. We got our morning show from 7 to 10 a.m. on the Better Sports Network. It's also on our channel, Front Yard Fantasy on YouTube. Come hang out with us. We're a ton of fun. That is That has always been true when someone says it about themselves. We are a ton of fun.
I mean, I will, I'll co-sign on this. It is a ton of fun. Every time I've gone on your show, it's been an absolute blast. Like my cheeks hurt by the time I'm done with one of these shows. And it is fantasy content where we're talking fantasy and giving actionable advice, but it's also just fun. Simon, let everyone know where they can find you as well on social media. Groeneveld. Did I pronounce that right? Is it Groeneveld?
Nailed it.
Absolutely nailed it.
All right.
I'm
I've been
impressed,
practicing
Dave.
all night. Glad it worked out.
Groeneveld.
You got it. JL covered most of it. One thing he forgot is we're also incredibly humble. We are wildly humble over at Front Yard Fantasy, especially about the fun we have. No, but you can find me on Twitter at FYF Simon. And then you can find Front Yard Fantasy on Twitter at Front Yard FYF. Like JL mentioned, we got that morning show, but we've got other shows too. And what we're doing with all of these is we're pretty much just playing games and having fun with fantasy football mixed in. Popular versions of your favorite game shows turned into fantasy football games, answering Q&As, just hanging out with the chat. It's what we love doing. We love fantasy football, and we like to talk about nonsense. So we mix the two together.
Said it's so much better than I did.
I got to take yours and then edit it.
Yeah.
And what I got to say, there's so many brands out here where people met in the fantasy football space and then said, hey, let's start a brand together. You guys are one of the few brands that were actually real life friends. You guys went to school together and then said, hey, let's make a fantasy football website and a YouTube channel and all that. And you can just tell through the content that there's so much more than like an online relationship. The actual friendship just bleeds through the screen watching you guys, and it is fun stuff. But enough gassing you guys up. I could spend the whole hour talking about how much I love Front Yard Fantasy and you guys. Let's go ahead and dive in and talk about some football. We already talked about the Ravens a little bit going up against the Browns. The Browns are traveling to Baltimore in what should be a pretty fun game, AFC North shootout here. And we're looking at Rashod Bateman, who it looks like is probably going to miss another game. Really tough right now for the Baltimore Ravens, dealing with a bunch of injuries. So, Simon, let me ask you, are there any other wide receivers in Baltimore that you would feel comfortable starting if Bateman is unable to suit up this week?
There's one name that I'm comfortable starting, but comfortable, I'm glad you used that word and not like happy to start or must start. You can plug Devin Duvernay into your lineups. This Browns defense, even though I expected them to be better, so far they haven't been great against fantasy wide receivers. So I'm not scared off from the matchup. Devin Duvernay saw 7 targets last week, 5 the week before, both with Bateman out as well. He's getting the volume. You're just hoping he connects on one of those long touchdowns. If he gets one, you're happy. If he doesn't, you're not. But sometimes you got to play players like that in fantasy, and Duvernay's the dude. I know they've got Demarcus Robinson there playing a decent number of snaps as well, but he's not getting the targets. I'm not throwing Robinson in there. It's Duvernay or nothing when it comes to the wide receivers in Baltimore for me when Bateman's out.
Yeah, and honestly, we saw some different usage from Devin Duvernay too when Rashod Bateman wasn't playing. I mean, in the first few weeks, it was just a few targets here and there, and he just so happened to be scoring on like 50% of those targets going his direction. But dare I say, we almost saw a Deebo Samuel-esque role for him when Rashod Bateman was out. We saw some carries. We saw some, short little bubble screens at the line of scrimmage. I'm a huge fan of Devin Duvernay. He was one of my favorite 18th round picks this offseason. So love to see him getting involved in the offense a little bit. JL, outside of Devin Duvernay, is there anybody else you're thinking about, or are you kind of on the same page with Simon here?
There's not a single person outside of Devin Duvernay that isn't named Mark Andrews or Lamar Jackson that I want to start on the Ravens side of this ball, and including Devin Duvernay. I don't want to start Devin Duvernay this week. So I'm on a different side of this than you guys, a little less bullish here. His opportunities have gone up, Bateman out, but he really hasn't capitalized on it. He's been a wide receiver 3 or worse since week 1. Week 1 he had the 1 week where he's like blew up, and then I expected him to kind of fade away after that, but his usage has gone up with Bateman going out, but he just hasn't done much with it. It's been his target share in the season, 14.5%. Over the last 3 games, that's gone up to 19.5%. So that usually is probably indicative of Rashod Bateman being out. Devin Duvernay has gotten an increased role, but his performance has not changed at all. He hasn't been able to turn that into fantasy production. So I'm not even confident starting him.
Yeah, and now we're looking, I don't know what is going to happen with Mark Andrews, but he missed today's practice as well on Thursday. So, really the conversation should be, are we even comfortable with Lamar Jackson this week? If he's got no Rashod Bateman, he's got an injured J.K. Dobbins, no Mark Andrews, it could be tough for him in a matchup against a very formidable defense. But let's talk about that other team a little bit and, focus on the Cleveland Browns here. I want to talk about Amari Cooper. He's seen 10+ targets in 4 of 6 games this year. Amari Cooper has just kind of been an afterthought in fantasy circles. It seems like every single year, no matter what this guy does, people just don't like him for whatever reason. Is it crazy to start putting him in the conversation as a top 12 wide receiver, a wide receiver 1? JL, start us off.
I don't think it's crazy. I mean, he's over just this short amount of time, what we've seen in his percentage of games, wide receiver 1, 50% of the time so far this season. Wide receiver 2, 17% of the time. Wide receiver 3, 33% of the time. And did you guys remember? It's been Jacoby Brissett. It's been with Jacoby Brissett. And so he's going to get Deshaun Watson later on in the season. I think Amari Cooper I am the guy that you described in the beginning of this, Dave, where I just always count Amari Cooper out. But you gotta adjust with new data, and he's the guy there in Cleveland.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of crazy that people are still holding on to priors. Like Amari Cooper had some weird usage his first year and a half in the league when he was playing with the Raiders. And then ever since showing up in Dallas, he's been as steady as they come. And people just refuse to change on the take that they planted his rookie season. Do you have anything that you'd like to add about Amari Cooper, Simon? Or do we want to talk about David Njoku a little bit?
JL said it. He's not quite in that wide receiver 1 territory for me, but he's sniffing it. He's sniffing right around that wide receiver 1 territory. Yeah. You can smell it right now. And maybe when Deshaun comes back, I elevate him into that status. But if you've got Cooper, you're starting Cooper going forward. Like, you're not taking him out of your lineup.
Yeah, starting Cooper every single week. And I think another guy that is verging pretty darn close to must-start territory at this point is David Njoku. I mean, he just keeps performing. So the question I have is, kind of a softball question here, but what tight ends do you have ranked ahead of David Njoku this week? I mean, I think we all have Travis Kelce ahead of him. If Mark Andrews is going to play, we probably have Mark Andrews there. But you could make a strong argument that David Njoku falls into that tier with Darren Waller and Zach Ertz and George Kittle and some of these other guys. So, Simon, start us off here. Who are you putting ahead of David Njoku this week?
You named all of them. Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce. Those are the 2 names I have ahead of Njoku. And then exactly what you said next. That next tier, we're talking George Kittle, David Waller, Zach Ertz. I've got them in the same tier as David Njoku. But Njoku, I want to start him. I want to start him, especially in a game where I think these Browns are probably going to be trailing against the Baltimore Ravens. We saw their willingness to step away from the run in certain game scripts last week. It didn't go well, but we see that the Browns are willing to do that. And David Njoku is just heavily involved. He's a focal point of this offense. So those are the kind of tight ends that you want to start week in, week out. The guys that are one of the top 2 targets on their team. And David Njoku's proven to us that he is. It's him and Amari Cooper.
Yeah. And it's about time. I mean, we fell in love with David Njoku when he came into the league just based off of those measurables. For those that are unaware, let me just go through this really quickly. I mean, just unbelievable stuff. 4.6, 4.40, which puts him in the 85th percentile for tight ends. Speed score in the 81st percentile. Burst score in the 97th percentile. Agility score in the 80th percentile. And a catch radius in the 94th percentile. I mean, this guy is just off the charts in every single measurable that you can have for a tight end. We know he's a phenomenal athlete and has yet to really put it together in a full season, but got that nice contract this offseason. The usage is there, and I think it's finally time that we start looking at David Njoku as one of those elite, maybe not the elite cream of the crop, but that next tier. JL, do you have any pushback, or is David Njoku falling into that bucket for you as well?
I'm so happy to see David Njoku actually at least be something of what we expected, right? Like he's that guy. Him and OJ Howard are the 2 guys who, like, every week, there's always like the random weeks they would just go off and Twitter would lose it. Fantasy football Twitter community would absolutely lose it. And David Njoku in the system, they're using him a lot more, like they said they were going to in the offseason, which is great. I still think he's in that what we call the tight end glob over at FYF, where he's mixed in. He's not gonna be in that top 5 on the season, likely, like week in, week out. This week, though, I'm all about it. Against the Ravens, he's a great start, top 5 tight end, and I'm hyped for Njoku.
Yeah, I don't know how you can't be, seeing what we've seen over these last few weeks. It's awesome to see him finally breaking out of his shell. But let's go ahead and talk about a different game here. And the next game that I want to cover are the Pittsburgh Steelers heading to Miami to face off against the Dolphins. And we're already talking about tight ends, so let's just stay on theme talking about some more tight ends. Last week, Mike Gesicki was the overall number 1 scoring tight end. Unbelievable to see. Unless you're in a league that grades, how good your gritty was, Mike Gesicki was probably the number 1 overall guy for your scoring format last week. So what is this? JL, start us off here. I mean, is this a sign of things to come, or is this just a fluke and you're not reading into it too much whatsoever?
It is a fluke. I'm not reading into it too much. You got to look at what he's done over the season, right? He had a top 3 tight end performance in week 2 against Baltimore, and then the next closest thing was this past week in week 6 against Minnesota. But outside of that, he's been awful. He's been really like tight end 4 or worse throughout the season. The usage really has not been there for Gesicki. It's hard to tell whether how much the Tua injury could be affecting that.
Yep.
Mike Gesicki is talented, but it doesn't seem like he's fitting in that system. We're obviously getting news now with him, rumors that he's going to be traded. So it'll be interesting to see, but I don't think it's going to be a consistent thing for him this year.
And tight ends are so tough. I mean, I'm looking at the scoring leaders from week 6 last week, and it's hilarious. You got Mike Gesicki at number 1, Hunter Henry at number 3, Greg Dulcich at number 5, Jake Ferguson at number 6, Daniel Bellinger at number 7, Dawson Knox at 8, Jelani Woods at number 10. I mean, how are we supposed to predict this? Like, why are tight ends still a thing in fantasy football? Who the heck was starting Daniel Bellinger and Jelani Woods in their fantasy football teams last week? We're trying to play the game a little bit with rankings and hope that we can give people some good advice here, but you got Darren Waller disappearing random weeks. You got Jelani Woods scoring touchdown after touchdown. It is making for a very, very tough season to rank tight ends. So, Simon, back to the Mike Gesicki thing. I mean, are we starting him this week, or was it just a complete fluke?
Yeah, it was a fluke. We have to look at Durham Smythe was also out last week. Durham Smythe did not play, and he has been seeing the field more than Mike Gesicki throughout the season so far. So Mike Gesicki's snaps go up. Now, Durham Smythe primarily plays as a blocker in that offense, but Mike Gesicki is a route running tight end. So when he's out on the field more, he's going to be running more routes. He saw 7 targets this week, which was his season high. But prior to the last week, he was averaging 2.4 targets a week with a season high of 4. And we know who Mike Gesicki is. We've seen him over and over again. He's catch the ball and fall down, catch the ball and fall down, catch the ball and fall down. He's the opposite of a yak monster. Okay. So yeah, maybe he gets 4 targets a week going forward, but unless that target is in the end zone, you're going to be disappointed with what you get from Mike Gesicki off of his 2 catches from 4 targets.
Yeah. What was the term we came up with? The yak black hole, the yak hole?
The yak hole. He is a yak hole.
Yeah, and honestly, Zach Ertz is kind of at the same point, but he's got an excuse at least. He's 32 years old. He commands a ton of targets, so it makes sense. But yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the depth chart right now for Miami, and what I've been saying all offseason, you got Durham Smythe, you got Mike Gesicki, and you got Hunter Long. All 3 of them are good at 3 very different things. Like you said, Durham Smythe is a great blocker, Mike Gesicki is a great route runner, and Hunter Long is the guy that gets the yards after the catch on the few occasions that he gets the ball. And what you want is one of these guys to be useful in fantasy, but it's just not going to happen. And if you're looking at the San Francisco offense, they have one guy that is basically Durham Smythe, Hunter Long, and Mike Gesicki all packaged into one player in George Kittle, but they don't have that type of tight end in Miami. So they kind of have specialized roles for each of those guys. I'm with you. You know, Mike Gesicki, great route runner, and it wouldn't surprise me if at some point in this season he has another 2 touchdown game, but good luck trying to predict when that's going to be. It's going to be sporadic and unpredictable at best. Let's stick with this game and stick with this team. And I want to talk about Miami because it looks like Raheem Mostert kind of has a stranglehold on the backfield right now. I mean, Chase Edmonds has been rendered essentially useless. I mean, doing nothing these last few weeks, but Raheem Mostert hasn't been too great either. We might see a little spark come back into the offense with Tua Tagovailoa returning. So start us off here, Simon. What are we supposed to do with this backfield? Are you starting Mostert? Are we still holding on to Chase Edmonds? What are we supposed to be doing here?
Chase Edmonds, it hurts, but we're hitting bye week territory right now, right? Like there's lots of injuries happening. You're going to have to make some tough decisions. I don't want to cut Chase Edmonds. He's a highly talented running back with potential for opportunity behind one of the running backs. We hate talking about injury prone, but Coop talked about it this morning on our show. Raheem Mostert, if one running back deserves the injury prone tag, it is Raheem Mostert. He doesn't complete seasons. So that's why I want to hold on to Chase Edmonds. For the time being, though, it is Mostert's backfield. Maybe the upside's capped, but he's running routes out there as well at a pretty high rate. He's getting the bulk of those carries. And so even if you're not excited with the landscape of running backs in fantasy, dude's an RB2. And so you're probably playing him. You're probably starting him. There's a lack of excitement, but I don't know how you get away from it.
And I don't want to get too much into scheme here because I might end up losing some of the audience, but I just don't understand what this backfield committee is. I mean, Raheem Mostert, like you said, is very injury prone. He's never played a full season, but he is the only guy that matches up with the scheme that they're trying to run. They're doing the outside zone scheme, and that's not something that Chase Edmonds, Myles Gaskin, or Selvin Ahmed can excel in. They don't have that high-end speed where they can get outside and then turn it upfield, and that is Raheem Mostert's bread and butter. We saw him do it for years in San Francisco, and he did it very effectively there, and we see him doing it right now in Miami. But even if Raheem Mostert goes down, I don't know if you can take any of these other guys, Chase Edmonds, Ahmed, or Gaskin, and plug them into this offense. I feel like they might have to go to the free agency pool or make a trade. I mean, we saw it in the first few weeks. They tried giving the ball to Chase Edmonds, and he just doesn't know how to find the crease in this offensive line when he gets outside. He did really well in Arizona when he was playing against light fronts and behind a much better offensive line. I just don't know if it's going to happen here in Miami. So Kind of with you. I think that at this point, Chase Edmonds deserves to be dropped. We talk about it a lot of times, and Chad Parsons and Jordan McNamara talk about it on the Dynasty show. But sometimes you have those player grenades, the guy that you drop knowing that they might have some value, but realistically, somebody else is going to pick them up. They're going to clog up their roster for the entire year. And Chase Edmonds is probably one of those guys that is more damaging on your opponent's roster than he is helpful in your own lineup. JL, I know we've talked a ton about this backfield already, but do you have anything to add here? I mean, what are we supposed to be doing?
No, I agree with what Simon said, with what you added, Dave. But Raheem Mostert, over the last 3 games, they've shifted their usage to him. But this Miami Dolphins offense is not running a lot of plays, and they're also not, like, of those plays that they're running, it's mostly pass plays. So they're just not really leaning on the run game a ton in the last 3 weeks or so. Maybe that's more due to Tua. Maybe not. We're gonna get Tua back and see how this plays out. But yeah, I mean, Raheem Mostert is the only guy worth rostering on this team, and even that, he's not really that great or that consistent of a fantasy asset. So I'm not excited about this backfield at all, and the entire offense I'm pretty excited about.
Yeah, and we think with a Shanahanian running back, which is the coaching tree that Mike McDaniel comes from, we'd be hoping for 20 plus touches a game. But like you said, they're throwing the ball so much that even Raheem Mostert getting the vast majority of the touches there is still getting 12, 14, 15. It's never any sort of eye-popping volume. You're really hoping that he's going to rip off a big one to justify his fantasy output. Now let's go ahead and talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers, because this quarterback situation, I feel like we are going to be talking about this every week until the end of the season. I don't know if you guys saw the story where Mitch Trubisky and Deontay Johnson got into it at halftime, and that's why Mitch Trubisky was benched. And then Kenny Pickett comes out, and then he gets hurt. Mitch Trubisky goes back in, and I mean, it is a disaster right now in Pittsburgh. So start us off here, JL. First of all, are we looking at a quarterback controversy? Who's starting this week? Who's the better hold for the rest of the season? I mean, we can talk about this quarterback room as much as we want, as deeply as we want. Try to make some sort of, just sense of this quarterback room in Pittsburgh right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're dealing with here is that both of these guys are just not that great. They're just not. And say what you will about whether that is because of talent or if that is because of development or whatever. It's bottom line is that that's what we're seeing this year. This season, I think they're both good. They're going to see flashes from them both, but I think we're going to see them work Kenny Pickett into it more. I was pretty surprised when that story broke about them benching Mitch Trubisky for Deontay Johnson. It just seemed like a weird thing to do, especially when the argument was about seemingly about Deontay Johnson not getting enough targets and then them getting into it. It just kind of seems odd for the coaching staff to then be like, all right, QB, you're out. We're not replacing you.
Yeah, and that's why I'm trying to just talk. I don't even really have a question. I just want to talk about the situation as a whole, because something isn't adding up. Like with all the news stories that we're getting, trying to piece the puzzle together here, whether it's an injury or a benching, there's something not adding up in this storyline. So Simon, can you try to shine some light on what might be happening in Pittsburgh right now?
When I'm this confused about a situation like this, I try to look for people close to the team that I trust. And with the Steelers, it's easy. That person's Mike Tomlin. You know what I mean? Not all coaches do I trust. Like with the Seahawks, I'm not listening to a single word Pete Carroll says. Like I'm throwing it all out the window. Exactly. We're not paying attention. But Mike Tomlin, I'm listening. And he said pretty clearly, when Pickett's healthy, Pickett's our starter. Like Pickett is our starter going forward. Any of this QB drama is being drummed up by the media. That's their job. That's what they're supposed to do. But until that changes, I do think like whether he starts this weekend is a question of whether or not he's fully through concussion protocol, not a matter of is this Trubisky's game or is this Kenny Pickett's game. Now, where it gets interesting, if he doesn't clear concussion protocol or if they want to hold him out a week to be safe, Mitch Trubisky comes out and puts together another beautiful game, then I think we have question marks, right? Then I think we're going to start talking about it. Then I think the fan base might have something to say. But as of right now, unless that very specific scenario happens this weekend, I'm listening to Mike Tomlin, and it's Kenny Pickett's team going forward.
Yeah, talk about what have you done for me lately? And I mean, we just saw this with the Dallas Cowboys. Cooper Rush was red hot and luckily kind of pooped his pants against the Philadelphia Eagles last week, which set the stage for Dak Prescott to return. But could you imagine had Cooper Kupp won that game and was coming off this red hot winning streak? I mean, I don't think there would have been any I mean, there would have been a discussion about whether Dak even deserves to get the starting job back, and Mitch Trubisky with a good performance could push a very similar narrative in Pittsburgh. Last thing I want to talk about with this game, though, is Najee Harris, and we'll just play the fun buy, sell, hold game. He had a pretty lackluster performance, but he was able to save his fantasy output by jumping into the end zone on a nice little catch and run. So, Simon, buy, sell, hold. What are fantasy managers supposed to do with Najee?
Unless you can get by on name value alone, I think you have to hold. I think he's worth more on your team as an RB2, adjusted expectations from where you drafted him than what you're going to get in the trade market. Now, that being said, maybe some of your league mates aren't buying into these new rookies. You know what I mean? Maybe someone's not all in on Kenneth Walker. Maybe someone thinks Dameon Pierce is a bit of a fluke. I would move Najee Harris for one of these new unproven pieces if you can do that. But good luck. Most of those managers are probably well aware of the player that they have on their roster. And I think you're better off just rolling with level down your Najee Harris expectations and plug him in as an RB2.
Yeah. And, I put a thread out about this the other day, and it's something that I talk about all the time. I feel like everybody is playing the same game when it comes to trading. Everybody's trying to buy low on this guy and sell low on this guy. And, it's just, I don't know how to say this without kind of taking a shot at the entire industry, but everybody's kind of putting out the same information when it comes to trade targets. So it makes for a pretty stale market. So, just trying to be contrarian here. I mean, I have seen Najee Harris getting traded for pennies on the dollar. I just saw him go for Ramondre Stevenson straight up in another league. I almost wonder, like, if you could trade away a player like that, a guy that's probably going to be more of a back end RB2 for the rest of the season, and flip him into Najee Harris. I feel like it might be kind of worth it for those teams that are, bottom of their league standings right now and are 0-6, 1-5, need a prayer to turn their season around. Those are the teams that probably should be going out and trying to buy low on Najee Harris. I'm not a believer in the talent, but you got to take a home run swing if your season's almost over at this point. So, JL, what are you doing with Najee Harris?
Yeah, I love that. I love how you brought up your tweet from earlier about trading and how it's really not quite understood in this space. And I have no trouble saying it, that the industry and most fantasy players fundamentally don't understand the mechanism of trading in this game. And they don't know how to utilize it or utilize strategies to do it well. They almost all just take the same strategy, which is simple, just throw offers at their league mates. In reality, it's one of three ways that you can change your team, right? Improve your team: through the draft, through the waiver wire, and trading. And so it's a massive, massive advantage if you can learn how to trade well. And Najee Harris, I think, is a really good case for this, where you see players like Najee Harris who perform poorly, different from expectations of the public. People start to worry and they start to feel, oh no, I got to sell now before the floor falls out from under me. Well, guess what? Everybody else is worried too. Nobody else is like, wow, Najee Harris has been really fantastic for my team. Really returning on that draft capital. No, everyone's concerned. And so if you're going to go trade him, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage by trying to do that now, or looking at it from a frame of Najee Harris is going to be worse. I should trade him now. You got to look at it from like economics. He's an asset. So if you trade, like Simon said, if you trade now, you're trading low. And I love that you said he's a buy. He's a buy for me too, Dave, for that reason. He's got opportunity. It's not been efficient so far, has not turned it into fantasy points. Offense is terrible. O-line is not very good. But he's getting opportunity, and his value is dropped a little bit, but it's kind of retained a decent amount. So Najee Harris, I'm all about. I think he is, players like him where everyone else is down, those are the guys you want to go get.
Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of different factors to take into trading, and trading is one of my favorite things to talk about. I don't know why I haven't started a weekly podcast just talking about trading, because it is my favorite part of the game. And something that I try to do a lot this year, especially, is buy high on players, because if somebody comes off a big week and everybody is screaming, all right, sell high, sell high, sell high. And if I see a player that's trending in this direction, I think if he still has room to grow, try to buy him here instead of when he's all the way up here. So after week 1, I was going out and sending offers for Saquon Barkley, trying to get him where I could. After week 2, Breece Hall had his big game, and I'm going out trying to get Breece Hall. And people are saying, well, why would you go out and acquire this guy? He's a sell high. Well, guess what? If everybody is screaming sell high, you could probably get him for a little bit less than his actual value. So there's so much nuance to trading. And the last thing I will say about this, if you're in a league with your friends, and you are trying to get a deal done, if this is somebody that you're close enough with where you got their phone number, pick up the phone and give them a call, because just blindly sending a trade offer and getting it rejected, that's typically where that conversation ends. If you pick up a phone, call your buddy up and say, hey man, I got 3 good wide receivers on my bench right now that I can't fit into my lineup. I see you're hurting for a wide receiver and you got extra running backs. Let's work a deal out. A lot of times that, transaction that ends with a declined trade will then turn into a discussion and you can work something out. So don't be afraid to play actual general manager, pick up that phone and call another GM and get a trade done. Love trading. And like you said, it's one of those 3 ways that you can actually improve your team.
One of my, on that trading point, it's funny. A lot of people will say, they'll send out an offer just to get the conversation started, right? And it's typically not a good offer. Why don't you just get a conversation started? Why do you have to start it with a bad offer, right?
It's like walking up to someone, punching them in the stomach and be like, hey, it was just an icebreaker.
Just wanted to talk to you.
Trying to spark conversation, man. Shoot your shot.
Just checking if you're an idiot first, all right?
Speaking of trades, though, we used Sleeper. I'm sure you guys are familiar with Sleeper. It is my favorite fantasy platform to play on, and they have an awesome feature, the trade block feature. If you got a player that you are looking to sell, just hit one button and every single person in your league gets notified that that player is on the trade block. Great way to start a discussion right there. And as always, you can find the show on the Sleeper app. Just swipe all the way to the right where it says podcast. And you'll be able to find it every single Friday afternoon. Without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into this week's Sleeper Starts of the Week.
It's time for the Sleeper Start of the Week, powered by Sleeper.
All right, Simon, go ahead and start us off here. This can be as deep of a poll as you want, or it could just be a top 3 wide receiver that you have a ton of confidence in. Who is your start of the week for week 7?
Mine's a little bit deeper, and it's a guy who showed up last week. We were waiting for him. It is rookie wide receiver Wan'Dale Robinson of the New York Giants. The more I go back and look at that game, the more excited I get about this dude going forward. He only played on 15 snaps last week. 23% of the total snaps for the team. But on those 15 snaps, he was hyper targeted when he was on the field. We're talking 4 targets, 3 receptions. He turned that into 37 yards and a touchdown. And this was on a severely limited snap share in an offense that is desperate for somebody to step up as the top wide receiver with a quarterback who's looked better than he has in any of his seasons so far in the NFL. I'm in. I am all in. And I think you can start him with confidence this week, his second week back after that injury.
Now, Simon, we're already friends, man. There's no reason for you to be kissing my butt. I know that you just went to my Twitter page and saw my pin tweet, which is a video about Wan'Dale Robinson. I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I love Wan'Dale Robinson this week. And, like we said, we can sit here and dive into the metrics. Yeah, he had the most yards per route run. He had the highest route participation rate of the entire team. But for me, it's just more of like a gut call than anything else, right? Like, this is a good team. Good. They're 5-1. He looks really good. And this is a team that is desperate for any sort of offensive playmaker outside of Saquon Barkley. Kenny Golladay is just Kenny Golladay. I mean, it's a joke at this point how bad he's been. Sterling Shepard is out for the year. Kadarius Toney has like 35 snaps on the entire season. This team has been force-feeding targets to David Sills and Marcus Johnson and other guys that I hadn't even heard about prior to this season. If Wan'Dale Robinson could be any sort of slightly above replacement level player, he's going to get a ton of usage in this offense. Love the call. Love Wan'Dale Robinson. Thank you for that. JL, same question to you. Who is one of your sleepers for week 7?
I think Simon's going to be mad at me for this one, but my sleeper for week 7 is Rondale Moore, wide receiver for the Arizona Cardinals. I think a lot of people are going to be scared to start Rondale Moore. He really hasn't, the fantasy performance hasn't been there the last 3 weeks. But man, has the usage been there the last 3 weeks. He's averaging 92% of snaps since he's been back, and he's got a 22% target share in this offense. Robbie Anderson coming in, he's not going to be like, wide receivers don't really work like that. You can't just take a wide receiver and just like plug them into a system, right? Easier to do with running backs. Run through that gap. Go. Wide receivers, it's harder. They have to learn the playbook. They have to learn the system. There's a lot. It's a lot to absorb. A lot of people were worried about Rondale Moore with Dortch playing so well. Greg Dortch, while Rondale Moore was injured his first 3 weeks, Rondale Moore came back and he has been the guy. Dortch is irrelevant. You could drop him. So Rondale Moore this week, it's a good start. It's a good matchup against New Orleans. I don't think he's going to get the Lattimore treatment. I think Rondale Moore has a good opportunity to carve out a good performance in this game.
I agree. And I think when you look at the floor, especially, that's what I really like about Rondale Moore. I mean, they almost use him as an extension of the run game. I looked it up over his career. Over 50% of his snaps have come within 9 yards of the line of scrimmage or behind the line of scrimmage. So he's not somebody who's getting deep downfield and, hoping that he's going to catch a pass. They are manufacturing touches to get him the ball in space. So in PPR leagues, he can almost pick up no yards, and you're still looking at a 4 to 5 point floor just because you know that he's going to be fed some short touches. And then if he's able to break a couple tackles and pick up some yards at a touchdown, then you see the ceiling come to fruition really easily. So I like that call out. Bold move, though, I will say, JL. We're recording on Thursday night. The show comes out Friday morning, so we're going to know by the time this show comes out when people listen whether or not that hit or not.
That makes so much sense. Yeah, I guess that's kind of a useless start if it comes out after.
Well, we will see how it ages.
It's a glory play is what it is.
You are
JL.
either going to look like a genius or an idiot on Friday morning when this show comes out.
Well, if I'm
You
right,
will look like an idiot on Friday morning regardless, but you may be correct also.
yeah, that's true. That's true.
Well, let's
It
go
didn't
ahead
dawn
and
on
talk
me.
about the next game, Cowboys at Lions. And I think the most exciting thing in this matchup is Dak Prescott returning. We got to see a little taste and then instantly got hurt. Cooper Rush has been doing his thing ever since. So, Simon, start us off here. If Dak Prescott is, it looks all systems are a go for Dak Prescott. So, assuming that he is back as the quarterback this week, who is the biggest benefactor on the offense?
I think it's my 0-6 fantasy team where I drafted Dak Prescott, Trey Lance, and Justin Fields as my 3 quarterbacks in a super flex league. I think it's that. But outside of that fantasy team, honestly, I think it's these running backs. I think these opposing teams haven't had to respect Cooper Rush beating them through the air. He's a game manager, and he has done a great job of managing these games, but Dak adds another element. Teams are scared of Dak beating them through the air, and I think this is going to open up some easier running lanes for Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard. So while maybe you've been a little bit disappointed with Zeke's performances, the usage has been there. And I think having Dak back in this offense is going to up the game for both of these guys.
That's such a great way to look at this, Simon. And honestly, I hadn't even thought about that. In my head, I'm thinking CeeDee Lamb and Dalton Schultz and Michael Gallup, but that's such an outside or out of the box way of looking at this. And I love that call out, especially as somebody who drafted quite a bit of Ezekiel Elliott this offseason and not feeling too great about it right now. So JL, same to you. Are you going to go with the running backs as a benefactor? Or do you think there's anybody in the passing game that could step up now that Dak is back?
I'll take D, all the above. It's Dak Prescott. I think he's going to elevate everybody here. The passing options, of course, I think are the most obvious. The CeeDee Lambs, the Michael Gallup, who to me is the wide receiver 2 in this offense. I think he's a massive benefactor here, especially with Dak coming back combined with Michael Gallup's coming off of injury. I think he's going to have a good opportunity to carve out a role here. And then, Dalton Schultz, if he's able to get past that injury, I think he'll have a better. It's better to have Dak Prescott than Cooper Rush. But I think he's dealing with some stuff that's outside of just bad QB play.
Yeah, that seems to be the story with Dalton Schultz so far. And I also love the Michael Gallup call out. I've been saying for a long time here, one of my spicier takes is that Michael Gallup is a top 20 wide receiver in the NFL. And injuries have held him back so far. But I think there are a lot of teams that you can put Michael Gallup on where he would instantly be the wide receiver 1. And his issue is he's been playing behind CeeDee Lamb and he's been playing behind Amari Cooper and he's been nicked up with injuries. And we haven't really been able to see him do it. But I think he has all of the tools to be a premier wide receiver in the league. So I am hoping that this is the year that he can kind of stay healthy and get it done over the course of a full season, at least from here on out. Now, we talked about the running backs a little bit, and JL, I'll throw this question to you first. Right now, if we're looking at fantasy output on the season, Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott are right next to each other, with Pollard having the advantage right now in athleticism and age. The usage is still going to Ezekiel Elliott, but are we ready to put Tony Pollard ahead of Ezekiel Elliott in weekly rankings?
No, I think Zeke is still the main guy there. What we've seen this year has basically been what we expected, right? This 60-40 split between Zeke and Tony Pollard. Neither really has looked as explosive as they have in the past. Tony Pollard hasn't looked great. He's averaging 8.9 fantasy points a game. Zeke averaging 9.5. So they're right there. They just haven't been very efficient. But I'm still putting Zeke above Tony Pollard. I think Jerry Jones just cannot bring himself to not use Ezekiel Elliott when he put all that money into the contract to get Zeke. I think he's got I don't know, what is it, sunk cost fallacy going on right now.
Thank you so much for pointing that out. I've been saying this for years. I mean, it doesn't matter if they had, Christian McCaffrey on a rookie deal on this roster, Jerry Jones is going to make sure that he gets his money's worth out of Ezekiel Elliott. And we've been seeing this year after year. I mean, Tony Pollard is by all measures the better running back right now, but I don't think that we're ever going to see the changing of the guard, at least until they can get out of this seat contract. So thank you, Simon. I feel like I've been shouting this from the rooftops for years and nobody wants to hear it. Everybody is just falling in love with Tony Pollard because he's young and athletic and explosive, and
you can't expect
he should
Jerry
be the
Jones
lead guy there.
You can't expect him to be like a rational, reasonable person because there's no one there to check him. He's a man up in his castle who makes all the decisions. Like, he's not listening to anybody else. Like,
I say this all the time too. I think that the best run teams are the ones that have owners that are as far removed from the day-to-day decisions as possible. Owners shouldn't be making personnel decisions. They shouldn't be talking about, who's getting touches on the fields. The most successful franchises out there are the ones that have the owners far removed that are just going to throw money at the problems and fix them. I mean, I'm a Chicago guy. I saw with the Chicago Cubs for years where they couldn't do anything. And then Ricketts showed up and didn't really want to have any say in any of the day-to-day stuff, just threw money at the problems. And 3 years later, they won a World Series. I mean, that's the way that it should be done. Jerry Jones is just hurting his own team at this point. Yeah. Same question over to you, though, Simon. If you got anything to add about these running backs, I mean, do you think Pollard might take over, or are we just being crazy even thinking about that?
I don't think it's crazy, but I don't think he takes over either. What I do think has happened is Pollard has elevated himself. We're looking at a situation like last year where you were confidently starting Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon every single week. Dillon had a slightly lower floor than Aaron Jones did. Aaron Jones was the guy with the upside, the one with more usage, and I think that's what we're seeing here. Elliott's got the money. Elliott's got the snaps, so Elliott's going to be the guy that's higher in my rankings. Until that changes, that's how it's going to stay.
All right, and in this same game, we've got another muddied backfield a little bit. Jamaal Williams and DeAndre Swift. And we just got reports that DeAndre Swift is back at practice, and they said it looks like he is probably going to play this week, but still no guarantee. Let's just put on our imagination caps here and pretend that DeAndre Swift is going to be back. If DeAndre Swift is back this week, how does that affect Jamaal Williams? Simon?
It's bad for Jamaal Williams if you're trying to start him in fantasy. It's a lot worse when he's not the lead running back in that offense because – spoiler alert, he's not. It's DeAndre Swift whenever DeAndre Swift's healthy. That being said, I think Jamaal Williams is in that tier of backup running back that does have standalone startable value. And what you're looking for, though, is a touchdown from Jamaal Williams. And of the backup running backs, he is one of the ones that I think is most likely to find his way into the end zone. They've got a high-powered offense, and they like using him down there in the red zone. So DeAndre Swift could, as Coop always says, carry the pails down the field. He's going to carry the water, but maybe Jamaal Williams just punches one in, and you're pretty happy with it. That being said, if he doesn't get it when Swift's playing, you're probably going to be unhappy having him in your lineup.
Yeah, Lions and a powerhouse offense, just as we expected this offseason. How about it? But the one other thing I'll point out about this backfield, too, is there's kind of this misconception, I think, that Jamaal Williams is the goal line back. I think that Swift is the better running back at the goal line. But what we saw in these first few weeks was Swift would get the ball down to like the 5-yard line on some huge play, and then he was winded. He'd run off the sidelines, and then Jamaal Williams would get the, just plunge into the end zone there. I don't know if Jamaal Williams is really the goal line back there, or if it's just kind of been some weird circumstances in these first few weeks. So I'm with you. I think that he does have some standalone value just because you almost want to start anybody that's wearing Honolulu blue with how high scoring this offense has been. So JL, same question to you. I mean, if DeAndre Swift is back this week, are you still starting Jamaal Williams as an RB2 or a flex?
Certainly not an RB2. We saw Jamaal Williams perform through the first 3 weeks with DeAndre Swift there. So I'm not I'm not thinking that DeAndre Swift is going to come in and completely make Jamaal Williams irrelevant because he didn't start the season. That wasn't the case. They like Jamaal Williams. They want to use him differently. Simon was right. Jamaal Williams got 80% of the running back touchdowns in those first 3 weeks. So he was the one getting those touchdowns, which is going to help his fantasy performance at the end of the day. But Jamaal Williams is still valuable. He's still a valuable piece. He's more of a flex, like you said, or a player that you need to throw in when, as a backup, bye week fill in, that type of thing.
Yeah, and I think that's the move, especially now with bye weeks. Some people might be desperate with that RB2 slot with bye weeks and injuries. So Jamaal Williams probably does have a spot in some lineups. I want to talk about the Broncos and Jets game in New York. I mean, the Jets red hot right now, kind of hard to believe. And this next question, again, I don't even know if it's really a question. I'm just going to kind of throw it out there, and hopefully you guys can try to make some sense of this. The running back room for the Denver Broncos. We saw Melvin Gordon get benched, hurt. I don't really know what happened. I mean, Nathaniel Hackett came out after and said we just didn't have enough plays for him. I don't know what that means. So I guess, JL, start us off here. I mean, are we starting any running backs for Denver this week?
I mean, if you're really in a pinch, I'd be okay starting Latavius Murray. But I mean, like really a pinch. Like I'd rather start Jamaal Williams over Latavius Murray this week. And otherwise, Melvin Gordon, Mike Boone, Latavius Murray. I don't know. To be honest. It's hard to tell. We're not getting a ton of like information about why they're making the decisions they are. Getting weird, like that whole weird post from Melvin Gordon after this game this past week about the Chargers clowning him with the clown emojis on the jumbotron during the game, and him just being down, and that's worrisome. He seems super sad. So I'm like, okay, is there something like emotional going on in that organization, in that culture? Like what's happening? And we don't have insight into that. So it's hard to really predict. And so that lowers my confidence, and makes me really want to stay away from these guys, since I don't see their upside even being there. So I don't want to take on that risk if there's not upside.
Wow. JL, I didn't even know about that. I just Googled it as you were talking. I had no idea that they put him up on the jumbotron with a clown emoji. I didn't even put that together in my head at the time that he was playing against the Chargers. Like I just now made that connection while we were having this conversation. I didn't even realize that. It was such a bizarre situation, like in a close primetime game.
Yeah.
I don't consider I'm not a scout. I'm not a coach or anything like that, but I think I have a pretty good read on the game and offensive talent. And when I look at Latavius Murray, Mike Boone, and Melvin Gordon is just tiers ahead of these guys in talent level. So it was bizarre to see in a close game where they could have used Melvin Gordon, like plug him in the fourth quarter with fresh legs, when Latavius Murray is just plunging forward for 2.5 yards on every single play. Why wasn't Melvin Gordon out there? It was such a mind-numbing decision that I haven't really been able to understand yet. So
it's like a Hackett thing. You guys, like, do you think it's a Nathaniel Hackett, just like inexperience type of thing that's going on?
I don't know. And in my rankings this week, I completely copped out and waffled. I have all three of these guys ranked as back-end running back threes, and basically my advice is, if you're desperate, start one of them, but I don't have a lick of confidence in any of these guys. Mike Boone could come out and get 20 touches. Latavius Murray could come out and get 20 touches. I genuinely have no idea what to expect, and I've been keeping my ear close to the Denver beat, hoping that we'd get some sort of news throughout this week that would help me make a stronger decision come Sunday. But right now, I just don't have confidence in anybody there.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Simon?
I have a slightly different take here, and it's a little bit of a gut feeling. We get a couple of these games a year where you use this narrative and it pays off. I'm going to steal one of Scott Fish's lines here. The squeaky mouse gets the cheese. And I think Melvin Gordon is going to be a real squeaky mouse this week after not getting any of those touches in a close loss in primetime last week. That looks horrible for the team that they just had Melvin Gordon on the sideline if it wasn't injury related. Like you're talking about, it's a baffling decision. I think they overcorrect this week. We're going to see a heavy Melvin Gordon workload, and I'm plugging him in the lineups where I have them. I'm buying into this narrative. I really think that Melvin Gordon's going to show up this week because it was such a big mistake, so bizarre, so baffling last week that they're going to correct it this week and get that squeaky mouse and cheese.
I like that point a lot because I hadn't really thought about it, but I do feel like that does impact it. Like the media attention, the public attention on these coaches, like they're human. Of course, they're not going to be like, I'm not an idiot.
I'm a big fan of narrative-driven analysis, and I am completely on board with what you just said, Simon. I'm going to bump Melvin Gordon up a few spots in my rankings, and I think I might even go throw out some trade offers for Melvin Gordon because his managers are panicking right now.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's see if I can get a little bit of Melvin Gordon. I like where your head's at, Simon.
That is squeaky mouse.
Strong take. I like that one a lot. Now let's stick with the Denver Broncos and talk about Jerry Jeudy, who is getting drafted as a wide receiver too this offseason. And the usage has kind of been there, but over the last few weeks, 7 targets, 8 targets, 5 targets, 6 targets, but it has amounted to basically nothing since week 1 when he ripped off that big score. So here's the question. I'm going to throw it out there, and it might be spicy. Are we dropping Jerry Jeudy?
Droppable? Sure. Like, can you drop Jerry Jeudy? Sure. It's bye weeks, like I mentioned earlier, injuries. Like if you need a spot on your roster, but what we're looking at is an incredibly talented wide receiver. You watch him out there, he's still one of the best route runners in the NFL, even though we haven't seen it translate to NFL or fantasy success. He's still playing with a Hall of Fame quarterback, even if he's looked terrible. This offense is just broken. Something's wrong. Something's not working. Maybe I'm a little bit naive in believing this, but when I look at this team with Russell Wilson, Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Greg Dulcich, Melvin Gordon, I'm like an elite defense.
Albert Okwuegbunam.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, they got to make it work, especially with Alberto on the team. How are they not going to make it work? So I still believe we're going to see this Denver offense piece it together. And I don't want to be the dude that dropped the best route runner in the NFL onto the waiver wire a week before Russ figures it out, 2 weeks before Russ figures it out. Know what I mean? Like, it's if I can hold him, I'm doing my best to do so for the next couple weeks while we see if this Denver offense can piece it together. But man, if you got to drop him, you got to drop him.
Yeah, and I've not been the biggest fan of Jerry Jeudy since he's come into the league. I've kind of been an outspoken fader of Jerry Jeudy, but he was dropped in my home league and I snagged him up for all of the reasons that you kind of laid out there. He's still a good route runner, and we got to hope that, maybe these are just some weird growing pains with Hackett and Russ being on a new team. But I mean, there still is talent there, and I think that there is still a possibility that they can right this ship. So I'm with you on that take, Simon. Let's go ahead and talk about the Jets, though, because I do want to cover this game. And let's just talk about the Jets wide receivers, and kind of similar to the conversation we just had with Jerry Jeudy, but on a bigger scope. JL, can we start any Jets wide receiver? I mean, this team went from a high-flying Joe Flacco-led offense to kind of what we're seeing with like the Bears and the Falcons, where there just isn't enough volume to go around. So are we starting or rostering any Jets wide receivers?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm still rostering Garrett Wilson. I'm still rostering probably Corey Davis. At this point, Elijah Moore, I'm dropping. I don't think I can keep. I don't think this offense is going to take that big of a step up that Elijah Moore is really going to have any sort of significant change from the beginning of the season to the end of the season. Not saying that he won't have big games. He's a very talented wide receiver, but he seems to be the guy that's sort of getting nudged out of this wide receiver room. Garrett Wilson, I would still be rostering. I'm still just hoping that he's going to be the guy, super talented rookie. And you just got to hope that when you draft rookie wide receivers, you got to hold on to them, wait and see if they develop, right? If they're not looking like they're developing, you cut them. Garrett Wilson all signs are pointing to him developing, him being a good wide receiver. And so I'm holding him. I want to see how he develops. And then Corey Davis is more of if he becomes the guy, like he just seems to be the guy in this offense. Despite what all we all want. I know it's so no. It's like there's these players in the NFL.
From Tyler Conklin being the guy to Corey Davis being the guy. Like, what is happening?
So we count them out and then they come back and it's like, oh nope, James Robinson is the guy still. Dang it, so Corey Davis is still the guy. Okay.
Yeah. Same question to you, Simon. I mean, are you kind of doing the same, just stashing, Garrett Wilson and Corey Davis and hoping for the best?
Maybe some of them will be startable later in the season, but they're definitely not startable this week. Like, it's already been bad, and they're going up against maybe the best pass defense in the NFL in the Denver Broncos, right? Like, it is going to be rough sledding for anybody trying to catch the ball there, and we're already having issues with these guys. And on top of that, the past 3 games, it's been the Breece Hall show, and it seems like they're more than happy to let it be the Breece Hall show in New York. So we may not see a switch back to some of that more like high-powered passing volume that we were seeing at the beginning of the year with Flacco. I'm more comfortable dropping every single one of these guys. Garrett Wilson's the one I would want to hold on to just because of that rookie factor and the excitement of what we've seen. But I'm more comfortable with dropping all these guys in jail probably.
Shade of Braxton Berrios. So rude. Just the absolute disrespect, Simon.
I know. That was rude of me.
He is the highest scoring wide receiver on the Jets since Zach Wilson took over.
Is there any other player in the NFL that sounds more like a cereal brand than Braxton Berrios?
Oh my gosh, I hate you, JL. I hate you so much. I'm never going to be able to hear his name again without thinking about that.
It's now Barry O's over and over again. You just totally ruined that.
I was wondering where you were going with that, and then I said it in my head, and oh gosh. All right. Well, you guys kind of set up my last question here. This is the last game I want to talk about. We're already on the game. And one thing I want to talk about, Simon, you talked about it a little bit. It has been the Breece Hall show so far. I don't know if you guys pay attention to Keep Trade Cut or not. Crowdsourced Dynasty rankings. Breece Hall is now the RB1 in Dynasty, has surpassed Jonathan Taylor. He is the RB1 on Keep Trade Cut. Kind of crazy to see, but let's talk about his redraft value here. Is he a top 5 running back for the rest of the season, Simon?
It's in his range of outcomes. I'm a lot more comfortable saying he's a top 10 guy, but I mean, he's shown us he's got that top 5 upside. I'd imagine he probably finishes somewhere in between those two numbers that I just said, like maybe in that RB 6-7 range. But what a change from where he was being drafted to now. Like, even if I'm not confidently saying top 5, that's only because I think maybe he's 1 to 2 spots outside of that, not because I think he's an RB2 or even outside of that top 12. So I don't think it's crazy. I think that's how you have to look at him going forward. And if you're going to trade for him, that's probably what you're going to have to send out to get him.
Yeah, it's better to be early on a guy like this than it is to be late. I mean, I can't stand using the term generational talent because I think a generational talent is somebody like every 25 or 30 years that comes along. But he
Like a
definitely
generation.
that every generation, right? We can't have a generational talent every single year.
Every week.
That's not how this
A
works.
weekly generational talent.
But we'll say, maybe the type of talent that we see coming to the league every 3 to 5 years, a Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley. I think that he is one of those types of players, and he's been showing out so far to start his rookie season. So same question to you, JL. Top 5, is that in the question?
Yeah, I mean, top 5, I think it's going to be tough with the offense that he's on. But if they continue using him the way that they have been, which is like just feeding him, like Simon's saying, I mean, he's got 18 red zone touches so far in the season, 4th most in the league, fourth most among running backs. Targets got 5th most amongst running backs. Like, they're just feeding him tons of opportunity, and he's good. And I feel like this is just further evidence of the fact that it feels like every single year that like upper echelon of rookie running backs return value in redraft formats, because most people aren't expecting it. They're, we haven't seen it in the NFL. Of course, like every NFL player at some point, you've never seen them in the NFL. They got on the team, and if they're talented enough and they're able to avoid injury, typically it just feels like they return a lot more value. So yeah, Breece Hall, great to see him do what he's doing after a little bit of a sputtered start in the first week or two. A lot of people were worried, but yeah, I think he could be top 5. I wouldn't say that's the most likely outcome, but certainly within those range of outcomes.
Yeah, and for people that were looking behind the initial box score, you should have seen after week 1 that Breece Hall was a buy, and I was tweeting about that. He pulled a 19% target share as a running back in his first NFL game ever. That alone was enough for me to go out and send offers for Breece Hall everywhere I possibly could. Unfortunately, though, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, talking about Kenneth Walker and some of these other guys that draft these rookie running backs typically have the patience to hold on to them. So, Well, it might sound really smart after week 1 when Kenneth Walker doesn't do much and Breece Hall doesn't do much and everyone says go out and buy low. The reality is the guy that drafted Breece Hall in your fantasy league probably knows that it's going to take him a few weeks to get up to speed. So there isn't always an opportunity to buy low on these guys. Right. Yeah. And yeah, you want to talk about that. As a fantasy analyst, once you put on that designation that you are going to be a fantasy analyst, say goodbye to ever making trades in your home league because they think that you're always trying to get one over on them. Yeah. It makes it tough. But anyway, guys, I could have done this show for hours. It's just so easy to talk with you guys. But our time has come to an end. So let's go ahead and wrap up here with some outros. JL, one more time before we sign off, let everyone know where they can find you on social media, where they can find Front Yard Fantasy content, the YouTube page, all that good stuff. Go ahead and plug it.
Yeah, absolutely. You find me at FYF John Luke on Twitter, and FYF Simon as well. Yeah, we are the Front Yard Fantasy crew. We got a whole squad over there. Check out Front Yard Fantasy on YouTube. We are putting out content all the time, and just come hang with us. Promise you will not be disappointed. If you are, I will send you a picture of Simon doing whatever you request. As long as it is legal. So
how about eating a bush pizza?
Eating a bush pizza, absolutely. That could be, I think he'll do that for even if you don't.
You just got to turn on the camera later.
Yeah. Just go to FYF Simon and you will know exactly what I'm talking about. But seriously, Simon, before I give the floor to you, I just want to thank both of you guys for making the time. I think I have got the entire FYF crew on here now. I had Joey right on with Dave Richard a while back. To start off week 1, Jay Felicio was here with Jeff Bell. And then both of you guys. Am I missing anybody else? Who else do I have to add?
J-Wall. J-Wall's our last guy.
Of course.
And Tim, if you really want to get crazy.
You want to talk
Tim,
about trades?
Tim would be fun if you want to
get
Tim on here.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I get J-Wall sending me trades nonstop. I mean, that dude is hustling the trade market all the time. Love to see it. But Simon, floor is yours. Let everyone know where they can find you.
Yeah. I'm Simon. You can usually find me in the bathroom, but on Twitter, you can find me at FYF Simon. And then we're on Twitter, Front Yard Fantasy at Front Yard FYF. And all of our show schedules and everything that we're doing, you can find right there at the top of that page. So come check us out. Come hang out with us. And Dave, thank you so much for having us, my man. This
Of
was
course.
an absolute blast.
Over under, how many tweets are sent from the toilet? Tweets that you're reading on your timeline, 15% over or under?
I say over.
I'll answer for Simon. I'll say percentage of time that he spends of the day on the toilet is 83%.
83%.
It's an empirical fact. Yeah.
I'll say if you're scrolling through my Twitter, I can guarantee you that it is above 15%. You can find me on Twitter at Dave Kluge. YouTube pages at youtube.com/footballguys. Give us a thumbs up if you like the video, or leave us a comment below if you dislike the video, and tell us why. Any engagement is good engagement. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next week. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to give us a thumbs up if you like the video. That's going to help us find a bigger audience. If you're listening to this on podcast form, go ahead and leave us a review, whether it's positive or negative. I do appreciate the feedback. If you have not already, be sure to subscribe at youtube.com/footballguys so you can see this and all of the other videos that we have to offer at Football Guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you next week.